November 21st, 2021, a day that I did something that some people still think to this day was impossible. I ran a sub 3:30 marathon, dry, fasted, and as a zero carb consumer on the carnivore diet. This is my first marathon as well. I had ran just before it the Halloween half marathon in New Orleans on October 31st. Finished that race, was feeling really good, ran just under 90 minutes, and I said, man, I feel like I could do this double the distance. Let's try out a marathon. I'd already been following the carnivore diet since June of 2020, so just over a year and a half, and was feeling great, felt strong, body felt good, and like I said, I figured, well, I think I can do this double the distance. So I said, where's the next marathon? When is the next marathon? The next closest one to me, I'm gonna start training for it and tackle it. Well, October 31st, again, was the day I finished this half marathon. The next close to me, where I was living in New York City at the time, marathon was November 21st in Philadelphia. So that meant from October 31st to November 21st, that was my prep for the marathon. Also, to note, this would be my first marathon. I'd never run a marathon before this, so I'd never trained for a marathon. The furthest I'd ever ran actually was probably 15 or 16 miles just on my own, so I'd never run past that distance anyway. So I basically had 21 days of prep for the marathon, my first marathon, after having completed a half marathon and figured, hey, what the heck. So as I started training, body was feeling good. You know, there's not much you can really do in 21 days. You're either kind of ready or you're not ready, but I felt ready to go. So right before the race, a few days before, I just finished my longest run of the prep, which was 17 miles, and felt ready. You know, I figured anything after 17, it's going to be new territory. Obviously, I've never run 18 or 19, and just figured as I hit those miles, just go a mile at a time, you know, break it down in my mind, break it down for my body, and wherever happens, happens. If I hit the wall, I hit the wall, but let's just see what happens. I felt strong, I felt prepared. So as I'm eating these few days before the race starts, I'm thinking, you know, I ran the half marathon fasted, no food before that morning. And I also ran it dry, meaning I didn't drink any water on course. The water cups were there, and all the workers were there to provide, but I had a good pace going. I was in the zone. I didn't feel like I needed it, so I just kept going. So I thought about that and I said, well, if I ran the half marathon fasted and dry, because I was well fed the night before on a hearty steak meal, I figured, why not try this with the marathon? Now, some people were like, well, that's kind of stupid or reckless, or it's a rookie move. But I figured, man, I knew how I felt. And like I always say, feeling is understanding. So I knew how I felt after the half, and I basically did the math again in my head and figured, okay, exponent of 2 or 3, how the fatigue and the wear on the body and the mind will be from this into a marathon. I can do this. I can do this. Again, feeling is understanding, and I know how I felt. I know what I was eating. I know how I was feeling, and I knew those correlations into how I was performing. So as I'm leading up to those dates of the marathon, I'm just packing in the cows. Lots of bone marrow, lots of organ meats, lots of good beef, just loading up on nutrients. To me, I'm thinking, all right, I'm gonna have this, you know, suit of sustenance on my body, and that way, the day of the race, I'll be ready to rock. Having my electrolytes up as well, you know, making sure I'm getting in my magnesium, potassium, sodium bicarbonate, and sodium chloride. Those are the 4 things that I really use to make my own homemade electrolyte mix. And so the night before the race, went to a nice Brazilian steakhouse there in downtown, or Old District, Philadelphia, and cleaned the place out. You know, just kept the plates coming. I loaded up heavy. I had already decided that night for sure I was going to do it fasted. Definitely was going to run the marathon fasted. And my goal time was to run it under 3.5 hours. I would have loved to run it under 3 hours, but I figure that's kind of a stretch given it's my first one. So I figured 3:30 was still a solid benchmark to go for and something that I felt that I could do. Challenging, yes, but I felt confident in my ability. So again, that night, had a great meal, probably finished up around 6:30 p.m. And went home, stretched a ton, was ready to go. And then the next morning, I'd actually made or started making my own intra-course carnivore race gels, like to take on course. So I melted some bone marrow, mixed with some raw cream, and then mixed with my electrolyte mix, and put these little like Ziploc bags to basically have to be able to bite into and slurp down like race gel, like power gel, except this was carnivore in my own version, homemade. So I brought those with me, and it was just a few minutes before the race started. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to do this dry also. I'll see how I'm going. I'll see how I'm feeling, and I'll, gauge myself per mile and per marker. And then, if I'm able to feel like I can do it, like I'm going to do it dry also. So again, first marathon, the goal is to run under 3.5 hours, to do it fasted, so no food the day of, and then also to do it dry. So no water on course, no food on course, nothing consumed, nothing going into my mouth on course. No intra gels, no pick-me-ups, nothing. So off we went. It started great because I didn't do a sound check before, and one of my headphones was not working. I just had one, and I didn't realize that until literally right before the gun sounded. Add that on top of it. So hitting the race, felt great through the first half, the first 13.1 miles, cruising, and still felt good, 14, 15, 16. My pace was solid. I was definitely going to make 3:30. Was probably on pace for like 3:11, 3:15. And then I hit a wall at mile 18, I believe. And oof, did my pace plummet. I definitely felt the pain. I could tell I needed water more than anything, electrolytes. My mouth was dry. Conditions were great to run in. It was right around 40 degrees when we stepped off, so it was perfect. All of Philadelphia was out and about. God bless you, the city of Philadelphia, man. Like every mile, people were just everywhere. And it's a beautiful route through the historic district up into the hills, and just to see the leaves and colors and trees. And it was a great course. And again, it's my first one, so I had nothing else to compare it to. But I had a blast. But right around mile 18 is when I hit this wall, and like, oh man, did I want to drink water? Bad. I wanted to crack one of those race gels. Bad. But I was like, okay, mile 18, it's just like 6 and change to go. You can do this. Or 8 and change, rather. It's bad math. To go. You can do this. So I started breaking it down in my mind, just mile at a time, mile at a time. You can do anything, just mile at a time. Well, I had to break those miles down half mile at a time. Then I had to break those down quarter mile at a time because the pain was for real. My legs felt like lead. My head was kind of getting crampy, and headaches were starting to set in. I just knew I was getting dehydrated for sure. Electrolyte imbalance, and for sure, the lack of water. I could just feel my muscles wanting to give up. But I kept going. My pace again plummeted, like I said. I forget what the numbers were, but I believe I started, I was right around 7 minutes for most of the race, and I think I finished at around like 8:30 pace. So 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then that final mile home, had the Rocky music going, going the distance. You had to have it. All of Philadelphia, American flag, seeing like the Capitol and everything. It was freaking sick. And ended up finishing the race under 3.5 hours with a time of 3 hours, 25 minutes, and 7 seconds. I was stoked. It was still my only marathon to this day. And again, having done it fasted, dry, and on a zero-carb carnivore diet for training, for prep, for everything. There's still people that say it's not possible. Had some friends of mine that are a bunch of ultra runners and in a group, and they were all like, dude, how'd you do that without water and this and that? And I was like, man, I think you guys are way cooler than I am running 50, 60, 100 mile, 150 mile races. I think that's way cooler than what I did. But people are still mind blown by the fact that I did this without water, without anything on course, and in a time under 3.5 hours, and for the first marathon. So this diet is serious. You're able to push yourself to different limits. Could I have done this on a different diet? I don't know. I don't know how well a carb fueled diet would have gone that way, dry and fasted. I'm sure you could, maybe, but I don't know. I know that I did it this way, and I know how I felt, and I know how I performed. I don't know if I'd be able to have done it a different way. Being able to draw all that energy from the fat that I had eaten and the fat that was on my body being fat adapted and basically just running on that fat fuel. I don't know. Now, of course, the curious one in me says, well, if I was able to do that dry and fasted, what could I do fed and hydrated? Oh, well, that's to be determined, but don't worry, it's in my head.